So today, we're going to dive into a really personal story about a Parkinson's diagnosis. It's a journey that kicks off with a pretty grim outlook, but ends up at this radical idea that maybe the conventional way we look at it is missing the big picture. Let's see how they get there. I mean, talk about a powerful statement. This is really at the heart of the story we're exploring today. It charts this course from total despair to real hope, and it's all built on questioning some of the basic ideas about how we're supposed to manage a degenerative disease. So, how did this story even begin? Well, like it does for so many, it started with these subtle little signs, which were then followed by a diagnosis that, felt like the end of the world. The source paints this really terrifying picture of the path laid out by specialists. It starts with a little stiffness, some unsteadiness, maybe a shake in your arm. Then come the tests, then the confirmation, and boom, a grim prognosis. The author was just left in total shock, staring down a future they were terrified would just be about decline and depending on others. That after weeks of feeling hopeless, something shifted. That fear turned into anger, and this burning need for real answers. And that led to a core criticism of conventional medicine, which the source explains with this really powerful analogy. Okay, so first, we've got to understand the science here, at least as the article lays it out. It's a pretty clear chain reaction, right? Specific nerve cells in a part of the brain start to die off. That causes a drop in dopamine. And that drop in dopamine is what leads to the classic symptoms of Parkinson's. Simple enough. But get this, and this part is just staggering. The source highlights that by the time a person even starts to notice the first symptoms, as much as 80% of those crucial dopamine-producing cells might already be gone. 80%. And this is where the source really starts to build its argument. It says that conventional treatments, like drugs designed to boost dopamine, are jumping in at step 2. They're treating the symptom, the lack of dopamine, but they're not addressing the cause, the reason those cells are dying to begin with. And this analogy just illustrates the whole argument perfectly. The article frames modern therapy like you're in a boat that's sinking. You're just furiously bailing out water, which, sure, it keeps you afloat for a while, but you're not actually fixing the leak. The boat is still going down. So that leads to the million-dollar question at the heart of this whole journey. If we're not supposed to just bail water, what is the leak? Well, the source claims to have found some answers. Yep, this is the exact question that the source says is so often overlooked. The focus suddenly shifts from just managing dopamine levels to really digging in and understanding why those all-important cells are dying off. And through all their research, the author zeroes in on what they call 3 root causes. First up, chronic inflammation, which we know is a huge stressor on the entire body. Second, environmental toxins. Stuff in everyday products that put our brains under serious stress. And third, this really nasty, vicious cycle of low moods and stress, which is both a symptom of low dopamine and a huge roadblock to actually getting better. Now, here's where the article makes a pretty provocative claim. It suggests that none of this is secret information. The reason, it argues, that these root causes aren't the main focus of treatment is, it's cultural. The doctors often prescribe pills because they know it's a lot easier to get a patient to take a pill than to make huge changes to their lifestyle. So, if the problem has all these different parts, the solution has to match, right? So the source then lays out this new approach that's designed to attack the disease from every single angle. So here's the game plan they lay out. First, you go after the root causes of that cell loss. That's patching the leak in the boat. Second, you work on naturally boosting your dopamine levels. And third, you use very specific daily habits to directly manage and reduce the symptoms you're actually feeling, like stiffness or tremors. This whole approach is packaged in the source as something called the Parkinson's protocol, and it's attributed to a practitioner named Jodi Knapp. But the core of it isn't some massive, life-altering overhaul. It's actually a series of 12 small habits that you introduce one by one, focusing on things like anti-inflammatory foods, certain exercises, and techniques to reduce stress. And the thinking behind this is actually pretty compelling. The idea is that, the disease might be causing decline in one area of your health, but by putting these new positive habits into place, you're actively improving your health in 3 other areas. The goal is for the improvements to simply overwhelm the decline. So what's the end game here? What does all this actually mean for someone's future? Well, the source draws a stark contrast between the typical progression of the disease and this new path it claims is possible. You see, typically, patients are told to expect this sort of slow march through these 5 stages. It goes from mild symptoms to eventually severe disability. It's a progression that medicines can sometimes slow down, sure, but not really stop. But here's where the source makes its boldest claim. It says that this new approach can slow down the progression so dramatically that a person might never even leave the earliest stages. The goal isn't just to delay what's coming, it's to effectively outrun it for the rest of your life. And this quote from the author, wow, it just says it all, doesn't it? It captures that newfound confidence perfectly. They're no longer looking at a future defined by decline, but one where the disease is essentially held in check indefinitely, which allows them to just live a full life. So, in the end, the source really boils everything down to this one simple but huge question. It frames the debate not as being against medicine, but as a choice between two different philosophies of healing. Are you going to passively manage your symptoms, or are you going to actively change your lifestyle to tackle what it claims are the root causes? It's a provocative thought to end on, for sure, and an important reminder that what we've talked about today is one perspective from one source, and that any real health decision should always involve a medical professional.